Hey, welcome. Today we're looking at polynomial inequalities and domain of square roots. More so, we're looking at the square root stuff. Just a little note here that the problems 1 through 4 in your Alex assignment today are review from last time. So, yeah, just a refresher. That's mostly the polynomial stuff. The bottom part, find domain of the square root stuff, we're gonna do right now. All right, so let's check it out. So it's asking us find domain of u of x is equal to square root of x minus 2 and write it as an inequality. So remember we talked about a while ago when we were talking about square root stuff that if we have anything negative inside of our square root, then there's no answer because there's no number multiplied by itself that's going to give us a negative. Right, so anytime we have this, we said it's going to be imaginary. That's going to be our I. So when we're talking about domain, we're not talking about any imaginary numbers or complex numbers. We're only talking about numbers that are real. So any number in here, so we're looking at square root of x minus 2, right? That's going to make this either 0 or positive, because if it's negative, then we're back in this situation here where we have a negative under the square root, and it's going to be imaginary. So what I know is that, all right, let's first think about what would make that 0. So if I put a 2 in there, 2 minus 2 is 0. Okay, so that's going to be one of the limits, right? That's going to be the edge of one of our stuff. So anything that I put in bigger than that, right? So let's say we put in a 3. So if I put a 3 in for x, then we get 3 minus 2, which is 1. That's good, right? It's positive. Any positive number we come out with, we're going to end up being able to find a square root for. So what we're going to say is for our inequality, x is 2, right? We said 2 is our limit. That makes us our 0, right? That makes our square root 0. And then we said that anything greater than or equal to is going to be okay in there, right? So it says write it as an inequality. So we know that anytime we have a 2 or bigger in for our x, we're going to be okay. It's not going to be imaginary. Anytime we have something that's less than 2, then it's going to mess us up. We're going to have a negative number in there. All right, so it's pretty easy once you know what we're looking for. All right, so same thing, find domain. We're looking at h of x is equal to square root of 5 minus 5x. All right, this time's a little bit more tricky, right? Because this time, last time, we had just x minus 2. That's easy enough to see. If you have trouble with it, what we're going to do is say that everything inside here, so we're going to say 5 minus 5x, that whole thing has got to be greater than or equal to 0. Right? Anything under the square root sign has got to be either equal to 0 or greater than. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use our algebra to solve. The tricky thing is here that we have to remember anytime we multiply or divide both sides by a negative when we have an inequality, that we're going to have to flip the sign. So that's the one tricky part here. So let's solve this. We're going to subtract our 5. 5 minus 5 is 0. That's what we want. 0 minus 5 is negative 5. And then here's when we're dividing both sides by a negative. So when we do that, they cancel. But we need to remember, we need to flip that sign. So x is going to be, instead of greater than or equal to now, it's going to be less than or equal to 5 divided by 5, which is 1. Now let's think about it. So if I plug a 1 in for our x, then I get 5 minus 5, which is 0. That's fine, right? Let's do something less than 1. The easiest would probably be 0, right? So if I plug in 0 again here, then I get 5 minus 0, which is 5. The square root of 5, that's positive. We're okay. All right, so we know that we did that correctly. So it's always good to go back and check by plugging in some values. The last one, again, we can just say that whole thing under the radical sign is got to be greater than or equal to 0. We're going to solve algebraically. So we get negative x is greater than or equal to negative 7. We're almost there. We don't like that negative sign in front of the x, so you can either multiply both sides by a negative, or you can divide both sides by a negative. that cancels. But again, because we divided both sides by a negative, we got to flip that inequality. So x has got to be less than or equal to 7. You can go back and check, right? If I plug a 7 in there, negative 7 plus 7 is 0. That's fine. Now let's take a number less than 7. I like to use 0 if I can. And 0 is definitely less than 7. So if I plug a 0 in there, 0 plus 7 is 7. And we're still good because we have a positive square root inside of our square root, excuse me. So we're good. All right, that's it for today. You're just going to be working on finding the domain of square roots. I think we did it earlier. I think it's just making it a little bit more complex with the equations or with the expressions underneath the square root. So it's good practice, good reminder, especially for those of you who are continuing on after Algebra 2 into higher levels of math, because it's something that we assume that all students know at higher levels, and it's not something that really we go back and talk too much about. We just assume that you know. So yeah, it's a good review or refresher, or in case you didn't get it before, a starting point. Okay, make sure if you have any questions, you bring them in next class. You can talk about them and hopefully clear up all your questions. All right, good job.